Alexander the Great. Born in 356 BC in the kingdom of Macedon, Alexander was the son of King Philip II, a brilliant warrior who transformed Macedon into the strongest military power in Greece. From childhood, Alexander was raised not as an ordinary prince, but as a future conqueror. Legend claimed that when he was only a boy, he tamed the wild horse Bucephalus after realizing the animal feared its own shadow. His father reportedly told him, "My son, seek a kingdom equal to yourself. Macedon is too small for you." Alexander's education was guided by one of the greatest minds in history, the philosopher Aristotle. Under Aristotle's teaching, Alexander studied philosophy, science, medicine, and literature. But while he admired knowledge, his true passion was glory. He idolized the heroes of Homer's Iliad, especially Achilles, believing that greatness on the battlefield was the path to immortality. In 336 BC, tragedy struck. King Philip II was assassinated during a royal celebration. At only 20 years old, Alexander suddenly became king. Many Greek city-states believed the young ruler would be weak and inexperienced. They rebelled almost immediately. Alexander answered with terrifying speed. Marching south with his army, he crushed revolts across Greece and destroyed the city of Thebes after it resisted him. Thousands were killed or enslaved, and the city was left in ruins as a warning to all who dared oppose him. After this brutal display, Greece submitted to his authority. But Alexander's ambitions reached far beyond Greece. For generations, the mighty Persian Empire had dominated the East. It was the largest empire the world had ever seen, ruled by King Darius III. Alexander dreamed of conquering it completely. In 334 BC, he crossed the Hellespont into Asia with around 40,000 soldiers. Though vastly outnumbered, Alexander relied on speed, discipline, and fearless leadership. At the Battle of the Granicus River, he led cavalry charges personally, fighting at the front beside his men. The Persians were defeated, and the doors of Asia Minor opened before him. City after city fell. Some surrendered peacefully, seeing Alexander as a liberator from Persian rule. Others resisted and paid dearly. In every victory, Alexander gained not only land, but also confidence in his belief that destiny favored him. The first great showdown between Alexander and Darius III came at the Battle of Issus in 333 BC. Darius commanded a massive army, perhaps several times larger than Alexander's force. Yet Alexander exploited the narrow battlefield, preventing the Persians from using their numbers effectively. Charging directly toward Darius himself, Alexander shattered the Persian center. Darius panicked and fled the battlefield, abandoning even his own family behind. The victory transformed Alexander into a legend. Instead of chasing Darius immediately, Alexander turned south toward the Mediterranean coast to destroy Persian naval power. Most cities surrendered, but one refused: the island fortress city of Tyre. The Siege of Tyre became one of the most extraordinary military operations of the ancient world. Since these cities stood offshore, Alexander ordered his men to build a massive stone causeway through the sea itself. For 7 brutal months, the siege continued under constant attack. Finally, Macedonian forces breached the walls. Enraged by the resistance, Alexander ordered a terrible massacre. Thousands died, and survivors were sold into slavery. After Tyre fell, Alexander marched into Egypt, where he was welcomed as a liberator from Persian rule. The Egyptians crowned him as a pharaoh, and he founded a new city on the Mediterranean coast, Alexandria. It would later become one of the greatest centers of learning and culture in the ancient world. In Egypt, Alexander also journeyed into the desert to visit the Oracle of Amun at Siwa Oasis. Ancient writers claim the priest greeted him as the son of a god. Whether true or not, the experience deeply affected him. From then on, Alexander increasingly believed he possessed a divine destiny. In 331 BC, Alexander marched east once more for the final confrontation with Darius III. The two armies met near the village of Gaugamela in modern-day Iraq. Darius assembled a gigantic force, including war elephants and scythed chariots, designed to slice through enemy troops. Once again, Alexander's tactical brilliance prevailed. Using precise formations and sudden cavalry attacks, he broke through Persian lines and drove directly toward Darius. The Persian king fled for a second time, and this time his empire collapsed completely. Babylon, Susa, and Persepolis, the magnificent capitals of Persia, all fell into Alexander's hands. At Persepolis, the ceremonial heart of the Persian Empire, Alexander's troops looted unimaginable treasures. Later, the royal palace was burned in a great fire, possibly as revenge for Persia's earlier invasion of Greece, or perhaps during a drunken celebration. The flames symbolized the end of the Persian Empire. Yet Alexander was not satisfied. He pursued Darius deep into Central Asia, determined to capture him alive. Before Alexander could reach him, Darius was murdered by his own nobles. When Alexander found the dying Persian king, he reportedly covered him with his cloak and promised vengeance against the traitors. Now Alexander ruled the largest empire on earth. But conquest had changed him. The young king, who once fought beside his soldiers, began adopting Persian customs and demanding greater worship from his followers. Many Macedonians grew uneasy. Some believed Alexander no longer saw himself as merely human. His campaigns also became increasingly brutal. In distant territories, rebellions were crushed mercilessly. Trusted companions were executed over suspected betrayals. Even his close friend Clitus, the man who once saved Alexander's life in battle, was killed by Alexander himself during a drunken argument. Still, Alexander pressed onward. He invaded modern-day India in 326 BC, crossing dangerous mountains and rivers to face powerful kingdoms unknown to the Greeks. At the Battle of the Hydaspes River, he fought King Porus, whose army included terrifying war elephants. Despite difficult conditions, Alexander won the battle and admired Porus so greatly that he allowed him to continue ruling as an ally. But Alexander's army had finally reached its limit. After years of endless marching, fighting, and suffering, his exhausted soldiers refused to go farther east. Standing before them, Alexander pleaded for one more campaign, dreaming of reaching the edge of the world. Yet the men would not move. For the first time in his life, Alexander was forced to turn back. The journey home proved disastrous. Crossing the harsh Gedrosian desert, thousands of his troops died from heat, starvation, and exhaustion. By the time they returned west, the once invincible army was broken. Then in 323 BC, while in the city of Babylon, Alexander suddenly fell ill. After days of fever and pain, he died at only 32 years old. The cause of his death remains a mystery even today. Some blamed disease, others suspected poisoning. But whatever the truth, the greatest conqueror of the ancient world was gone before his empire could truly stabilize. Without Alexander, his empire shattered almost immediately. His generals fought bitter wars over the territory, dividing it into rival kingdoms. Yet although his empire did not survive intact, his influence changed history forever. Alexander spread Greek culture across Egypt, Persia, and Asia, creating the Hellenistic world, a blending of Greek, Egyptian, Persian, and Eastern traditions that shaped civilization for centuries. Cities he founded became centers of trade, science, and learning. His legend inspired rulers from Julius Caesar to Napoleon Bonaparte. More than 2,000 years later, the name Alexander the Great still echoes through history. not merely as a king, but as the man who nearly conquered the known world before the age of 33.